During a seemingly routine patrol, Officer Neal spotted a suspicious truck swerving down the highway. The license plate check confirmed his suspicions. It was stolen. As the sirens blared and the chase ensued, Neal couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply amiss about the family inside. But the real shock came when he finally apprehended them and opened the trunk to find… But what did Officer Neal encounter in the stolen truck? Why was the whole family trying to get away from Officer Neal? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. For Officer Neal, this patrol day had started out like any other, but it would quickly turn into one of the most intense and noteworthy days he had on the force. And that was saying something, seeing as he was already in the job for 15 years. He was an experienced officer who believed that he had seen it all. The driver was making irrational decisions by the looks of things, like he was in a hurry. He was most definitely going over the speed limit. But Officer Neal felt like there was more going on. He quickly set in a chase of the truck, while radioing back to the station about his situation. Neal opened up his window and yelled at the driver to come out with his hands up. This had to stop before anybody got hurt. There was still a way to make this right. But either the driver did not hear him or he did not care, as he floored the gas out of seemingly nowhere and sped past Officer Neal's squad car. Neal was now getting absolutely furious. This was getting to a point where things could only end in disaster. And his ignorant driver was going to be fully responsible for that. With 3 police cars now chasing the truck and others trying to cut it off at other intersections, Neal knew that it was only a matter of time before they would have the driver in custody and hopefully had the family in safe hands. But then out of nowhere, with the truck heading towards a gas station, somebody jumped out of the truck, and it was clearly the driver. The truck, now without its driver, became a speeding missile on wheels. With a deafening crash, the truck collided head-on. The truck had come to a jarring, definitive halt. Neal, catching his breath, quickly radioed in the situation, preparing to approach the vehicle and ensure the safety of its passengers. As the door swung open, Neal braced himself for what he might find, praying that he wasn't too late. With the door now open, Neal wasted no time. Reaching in, he grasped the nearest form, pulling it out with urgency. As Neal laid each body on the ground, he noticed something deeply unsettling. The forms were limp, far too limp. There was no movement, no signs of breathing, no cries of distress. The skin felt oddly cold and rubbery to the touch. Confusion clouded Neal's mind. A cold dread began to settle in Neal's chest. Had he been too late? The other officers began to gather around, their faces reflecting the same growing horror. The surrounding officers stared in disbelief. Whispers of confusion spread like wildfire. What's going on? Why puppets? Where's the real family? The questions were endless, but answers were scarce. Neal, his face a mask of disbelief, tried to process the bizarre tableau before him. The weight of the situation pressed down on them all. How had they been so deceived? The questions were many, but the answers remained elusive. Amidst the confusion, a chilling thought struck Neal. The driver! In the chaos of the discovery, the man behind the wheel had been momentarily forgotten. A quick scan of the area confirmed Neal's fears. The driver had vanished. Officers fanned out, their radios crackling with updates and directives. The search perimeter expanded, encompassing nearby streets, alleys, and buildings. On the outskirts of town stood an old, dilapidated factory. Its windows were boarded up, and its walls bore the scars of time. Neal approached cautiously, every sense on high alert. As backup arrived, Neal quickly briefed the officers. They needed to be strategic. The goal was clear: leave no stone unturned and ensure the driver had no escape routes. As Neal navigated the labyrinthine passages, he paused, hearing a faint sound. Footsteps. They echoed through the vast space, betraying the presence of someone else. Turning a corner, Neal's flashlight beam caught a fleeting figure darting into the shadows. The silhouette was unmistakable. It was the driver. Neal sprinted after the fugitive, his footsteps echoing loudly in the vast space. But the chase continued, the stakes now even higher. The pursuit led them to a rusty staircase, spiraling upwards to the factory's upper levels. Reaching the second floor, the driver found himself at a dead end. Panicking, he glanced around, spotting an old window. Without hesitation, he sprinted towards it, smashing through the glass in a desperate leap of faith. Neil arrived just in time to see the man's silhouette against the night sky, descending rapidly. Rushing to the window, Neil looked down to see the driver sprawled on the ground below, motionless. The fall had taken its toll. But as other officers converged on the fallen figure, the man stirred, groaning in pain but clearly alive. The chase had come to an end. But for Neil and the driver, their confrontation was far from over. Swiftly, one of the officers moved in, snapping handcuffs around the driver's wrists. Even in his weakened state, the man's eyes darted around, a mix of fear and defiance. Neil, having made his way down from the second floor, joined the scene. His face was a mask of determination and curiosity, a twisted plan. The puppets were a distraction, a way to divert police attention, while other parts of his plan were set into motion. He spoke of accomplices, of a larger criminal network, and of a plan to divert police resources. Neil listened intently, realizing that this chase was just the tip of the iceberg in a much larger conspiracy. The police station buzzed with activity as the driver, now in custody, was led through its corridors. Inside the room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. A detective laid out the charges: grand theft auto, evading arrest, reckless endangerment, and the use of deceptive tactics, including the placement of a fake family in the stolen vehicle. The driver, realizing the gravity of his situation, looked down, his face a mask of regret. The consequences of his actions were becoming all too real. Internal Affairs swiftly stepped in, launching a thorough investigation. Trust within the force was shaken, and many wondered how deep the corruption ran. In the quiet of his office, Neil sat, replaying the day's events in his mind. The chase, the discovery of the puppets, the driver's confessions, it was a lot to process. As the day drew to a close, Neil walked to his car, the setting sun casting long shadows on the pavement. He yearned for simpler days, for routine traffic stops and peaceful patrols, but he knew that the memory of this chase, with its twists and turns, would linger for a long time. The courtroom was abuzz as the trial commenced. The driver, looking more subdued than ever, was led in, handcuffs glinting. As the charges were read out, including the use of a fake family as a deceptive tactic, murmurs spread through the room. Days turned into weeks as witnesses were called, evidence was presented, and arguments were made. The driver's use of lifelike puppets in the stolen vehicle became a focal point, highlighting the lengths he went to in order to evade capture. Finally, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts. The courtroom echoed with a collective sigh of relief as justice was meted out. Officer Neil stood before a mirror, adjusting his uniform. The events of the past weeks had tested him, challenging his beliefs and convictions. The experience had been a stark reminder of the challenges of his job, but Neil was ready to face them head-on.